All right. Sorry for the delay, but we will call this meeting to order at 1:04 p.m. Oh, well, we needed you for a quorum, so we would have waited longer. All right, with those rude introductory remarks, could everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, could you do the roll call, please?
Bernie Narvaez.
Here.
Ann Cottrell.
Here.
Mark Joseph.
Here.
Brando Cruz. Margie Moeller. Robin McKee.
Here.
Paul Doring.
Here.
Michelle Deasy. Donald Williams.
Present.
Kevin Eisenberg. Deborah Smith. We have 2 confirmed absences today from Directors Scott Sedgley and Director Liz Alessio. There are no directors attending remotely. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. All right. Next is adoption of the agenda, and I understand we want to pull consent item 10.8 relating to ADA assessment services, and that is, well, it's fine by me.
Yeah.
I would also, when we come back with that, if staff could provide a response to the letter that's in our packet as
Right.
well.
Yeah, we anticipated that bringing it back next meeting. So.
Okay, perfect. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Then I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda as revised with removing 10.8 or continuing item 10.8.
Move to adopt.
Thank you. All right.
It's removing it, continue it to another meeting. Okay,
Yeah.
understood.
And is that a second?
That's a second.
Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Right. Then we're ready for public comment. We have a nice big audience out there. Anyone wish to address the board on any matter that isn't already on the agenda? Anybody out in the internet that wants to talk? Then we're moving on from public comment. Next, chairperson's reports, and I have one. Actually, thanks to our executive director who did a great job summarizing the JPA ad hoc committee. I'm going to make it sound like I've got a nice summary of what we did, but it's really hers. And that was specifically that the ad hoc met Monday, the 17th. There's representation from all of the jurisdictions. Very productive. Probably the biggest collective direction that came out of the group was NVTA should develop and adopt a strategic plan that focuses on the agency's work efforts over the next 3 to 5 years. And so we hope that will come back for board action in the future. It was pointed out that board members can periodically share updates from their jurisdictions. So if you've built a great road, or if you've gotten a great pavement condition index, or anything that you want to bring to the attention of the rest of us, periodically under board member comments, you can bring it up. So just as a means of letting everybody know what's going on. As I said years ago, I know the problems in American Canyon, but I really don't know the traffic problems anywhere else. And I'd like to learn so I can be more useful. So just a quick reminder. And then specifically, we want to look at a couple of elements. We're going to ask our legal counsel to examine language that would allow recommending the mayor of each jurisdiction to be on an automatic appointee, but some language that would give each jurisdiction some flexibility if they chose to appoint an alternate in place of the mayor. We also wanted to explore adding a stipend per board meeting and possibly standing committee meetings to offset the cost of travel and time and create an incentive to make sure everyone shows up. And then also look at teleconferencing options. Legally, we could have, for example, Calistoga, because it's a pretty long distance, you could teleconference into the meetings at Calistoga City Hall, for example, and that would be consistent with the Brown Act. And there may be occasions where that comes in pretty handy. So we're going to explore that as well. The board or the ad hoc committee will still meet in the future because there's some other issues we want to discuss, but that's just to give you a highlight of kind of the initial consensus of the group. And so that's my report. If any other board members want to have a report, they can chime in. Otherwise, we'll go to MTC.
Just one clarification to more of a nuanced point. The strategic planning initiative has been in the works by our executive director, and so we confirmed that that should continue on. It's not something that we told her to do. She's indicated to us that that was something that she had in mind, and I just want to make sure that that is clear on the record.
Good point. I think our executive director deserves credit for where credit is due, and sometimes we electeds are capable of taking credit when it isn't our idea. So, point well taken. Any other board comments? Any report from MTC? Oh, Amber's not here. And
Chair, we have, we have a member of MTC staff that will be giving a report in a little bit.
Oh.
So we can just push the MTC
Okay.
and ABAG report.
good point. And Director Washington is not here with ABAG. Do we have anybody making any ABAG reports? All right, well then we're going to move to executive director comments.
Yes. Good afternoon, Executive Director Schmitz, and I just want to give a couple highlights. So Caltrans has given the green light to repave Highway 29 north of Yountville. I know that has been an issue for many of our electeds and council members up Valley. And so that work was actually greenlit this week, but due to the weather, it probably will not start until I'm guessing next week. And it will go through February of 2026. And so any subsequent construction updates I will bring forward to this group. NVTA has installed the latest bike and pedestrian counter in American Canyon on Wetlands Edge, the Class 1 multi-path there. This is part of our bike and pedestrian counter and Patrick Band's efforts to install, I think we're doing 2 a year. The next will be installed in Calistoga this winter. And I would like to introduce, we have 2 new staff members that were vacant positions that we have filled. So the first is Zaira Renteria. If she's here, could you raise your hand? Stand up. Zaira was hired as our bilingual outreach coordinator, working under the transit team on various transit and transportation programs, including transit travel training, bilingual outreach and education and training to community groups, and working on many of our V-Commute programs under Rebecca's team. Zaira joins us from Abode Services, working as a family outreach coordinator, and she's already has made great strides in building some partnerships with community organizations that we have not been able to reach out to in the past. So we have tremendous insight into how we can use Zaira as an asset to the agency and the transit system in getting more ridership. And then RC Alvarado, could you please stand up, joins our team as our new administrative assistant, which we also had a vacancy for. She graduated from UCSB in June with a bachelor's of social science, majoring in communications. RC's experience in public outreach and marketing and administrative support will help her new role, where she'll be assisting with many of our committee clerk duties. So we have about 4 or 5 standing committees that meet monthly, and so she'll be assisting with that, as well as backup to our administrative and finance team. So welcome RC and Zaira. And then I wanted to acknowledge our transit team this month, in particular Dexter Cypress, on finding a creative way to fund the bus purchase as part of your consent item 10.5, using Air District funds in a non-traditional way of funding a bus purchase. We usually use federal and state funds, but due to some limitations, he was able to find some Air District funds to purchase 2 battery electric BYD buses. And so well done, Dexter. And then finally, we have winners of our bus naming contest. So we have a fleet of electric electric feet with each has or animals or characters on each one of them, the bee, the butterfly, the owl, and the hawk. And we put out to the students of Napa County, K through sixth grade, for naming each of those characters. And so the bee will be Poppy, submitted by a fifth grader of Calistoga Elementary School. Genesis. The butterfly will be Mari, submitted by Mariposa, submitted by Eleanor, a fifth grader at St. Helena Elementary School. The owl, Ollie, submitted by Kimber, a second grader at Alta Heights Elementary School. And the hawk, Talon, submitted by Cody, a fifth grader at Willow Elementary School. And so each of those students will receive a pizza party for their class, as well as a kind of Vine Transit gift basket. So that will be formally announced to them in December. And that concludes my report.
Well, thank you, and welcome Zara and RC.
Welcome. Nice to have you. Just one question on the Caltrans update. North of Yountville is kind of a wide open space.
Sorry,
Does it
yeah.
include
The-
my city of St. Helena?
No, this is specific to, there are just north of Madison, all the way up to about Yount Mill Road, there's those deep ruts that are causing lots of tractor trailers and traffic to go into the shoulder or skirt the median. And so it's been brought up by several different board members as well as our congressman, and we've been trying to work with Caltrans. It's not in their maintenance program, so we had to work with Caltrans, Amani, and team to get a director's order to have that fixed this now, basically.
All right.
Yeah.
Our ruts in downtown St. Helena maybe are not as deep, but they are also in need of some replacement.
Okay.
So yeah, the whole corridor of downtown St. Helena, be remiss if I didn't make that pitch. So get on the list. Thank you.
Oh, all right. And I admit, I thought it was like north of Yountville all the way to Calistoga, so.
No, it was specific because it's not part of their shop list, that list of projects that you receive in the Caltrans report, but it's caused, they're looking, Caltrans is looking at it as preventative as far as like a pretty significant accident or collision, excuse me, in the winter season. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And then the Caltrans, I noticed in our packet, we have a lot of material about Caltrans projects.
Yeah, so we have the Caltrans report, but we're not having an oral report today because we have two presentations that
Okay,
are going to take up
Very
time.
good.
Yeah.
All right. So everybody, check out the Caltrans information in your handout. All right. Now, with all that out of the way, we are ready for our first presentation, which is an introduction of our new federal lobbyists, CFM advocates, and Joel Rubin.
Yes, so Joel, if you would like to come up here. CFM Advocates is our new federal advocacy agency that the board approved their contract last board meeting. And so Joel was actually in California visiting some other clients. I told him stop by and introduce himself and team. And so Joel, go ahead.
All right, does that work? Y'all hear me okay? Thanks so much, Danielle, and really nice to meet all of you. My name's Joel Rubin. I'm federal partner at CFM Advocates based in Washington, D.C. I really love any opportunity to get out of Washington, D.C., so appreciate this time to talk to you all. And the main purpose is to talk a little bit about what's happening in Washington, D.C., introduce our team to you all. We have two of our members here who I'll talk about in a little bit. And then this is going to be somewhat of a shorter presentation. I will be presenting to the board in December at the board meeting and going a little bit more in depth into your federal agenda, your federal priorities, and what's happening. We'll take a deeper dive into what's happening in Washington, D.C. I know that you all have a pretty packed docket today, so this is going to be a relatively short introduction, but happy to answer any questions along the way as well. So next slide, please. So like I said, we'll talk about a little bit about us so you all get to know us a little bit as we'll be working together closely on your federal agenda. We're meeting with your team today and tomorrow and getting a tour of many of the projects that you're working on. And we'll talk a little bit about the transportation reauthorization bill that's gearing up in Congress and then talk some about what's going on in our nation's capital. So CFM, we were founded in 1990. Our expertise is in local governments, public transportation. We represent the National Bus Coalition. We've been working for them for 10 years in Washington, D.C., and they have about 900 plus members, most transit systems in the country. And what we try to do is advocate for one main thing, and that's restoring money to the bus and bus facility program that you all take advantage of through formula funds and the competitive grant program. And we've had a really good success story with them, and I'll talk about that in a future slide. But that gives us a lot of exposure nationwide and to the committees of jurisdiction when it comes to the Transportation Reauthorization Bill. That will be helpful for us as we're advocating for your priorities in Washington, D.C. Next slide, please. So this is our team here. Obviously, I'm up on the top left. So I worked on Capitol Hill for a congressman from Washington State who was on the House Transportation Committee. We have Tara in the audience who worked on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. Kirby worked for, so we're a bipartisan firm. Kirby worked for a House Republican and Republican leadership. And Kate is the fourth person. She's not here today. She got sick, so she couldn't fly out, so apologies for that. But she worked for Secretary Buttigieg as a special assistant at the Department of Transportation, and she has a lot of insight and knowledge into how the DOT process works. Our main thing that a lot of our clients want us to work on is getting you federal funding. So we work heavily in the grant space. We actually help our clients write grants, submit grants. It's really a full service suite from beginning to end of knowing what the federal programs are that are available for you all and matching your priorities with those federal grant opportunities. We also help with what they call community projects or congressionally directed spending, formerly called earmarks. It's helping you find what projects are popular with your congressional delegation, ultimately help you submit those projects to them and lobby and advocate for those projects. We do the full suite of lobbying as well with legislative initiatives and working with coalitions across the country as well. Next slide, please. Just a real quick, this is a part of our success that we're really proud of is the return on investment that we've been able to provide for our clients. We've secured over $416 million in the last 4 years for our clients. We have a 62-to-1 return on investment for our clients that are seeking federal funds. We are the only firm in the entire country that has written, submitted, and landed 9 build raise grants in 9 rounds. Getting a build grant is like winning the lottery, and we're just really proud of our record of landing those projects for our clients, and we look forward to working with you all on those build projects moving forward as well. We also do the gambit of federal grants, the Safe Streets for All, Reconnecting Communities, all infra and other projects that you all would be going after over the next 12 months. We have a lot of success in the transit space. One of our clients got 3 bus and bus facility grants in a row, and we have a 100% success rating with the earmark process for our clients as well. Next slide, please. So Transportation Reauthorization Bill, every 5 years, Congress works on a big highway and transit bill. That's where we are today. The current infrastructure law, which incorporated the Transportation Reauthorization Bill, expires on September 30th of 2026. So Congress is actively working and putting together legislation to extend or reauthorize those programs. What are one of our main things that we're doing for our transit clients is, and the Bus Coalition is trying to maintain the $2.2 billion in the bus and bus facility program that you all actively seek competitive grants through. A quick history on this. Back in 2012, there used to be about $1 billion per year in the program. MAP 21 was the reauthorization bill that passed at that time. We went from $1 billion per year. We had a 57% cut. It was down to $420 million. That's why the Bus Coalition was formed to restore those funds. And over a 10-year period, we've gotten that number from $420 million up to $2.2 billion per year. And that's going to be one of the biggest fights that we have in Washington, D.C. is to protect that $2.2 billion bus and bus facility program. Those cuts that happened over 10 years, starting back in 2012, have been devastating to bus transit systems. The percentage of buses that we've lost fleet nationwide is 25%. because of those devastating cuts to the bus and bus facility program. We also have older buses that require more maintenance and buses that have just been taken off the road, which means fewer routes, less frequent routes, and diminished ridership because of that. So the infrastructure law that actually brought that up to $2.2 billion is critically important to restoring those fleet sizes, to getting a healthier fleet. And now's not our message to Congress is now's not the time to turn back the clock on those investments. We also want to maintain the competitive grant program. Formula funds are all well and good, but the amount of formula funds you all get is about $200,000 per year. It's really those competitive grants where you can get $5, $10, $15 million in one chunk. You can get those lumpy purchases to do 10, 15 buses at a time, or build facilities, which is really important, especially for mid-size and small transit systems. So we're working to be protecting the $2.2 billion funding level and the competitive grant program in this upcoming reauthorization bill. On the highway side, there's some concern that they're going to try to streamline some of the newer competitive grant programs that were created in the bipartisan infrastructure law. We went from about 5 major competitive grant programs before the infrastructure law to about 25 programs. So Congress is going to be looking to streamline some of those, put some of those competitive grant funds into formula funds. But there's a couple programs that are important to you all that we're going to try to protect, which is the BUILD program that I talked about before, Safe Streets for All, Reconnecting Communities. These are important programs that communities can go after for direct funding to do larger projects to improve your community. We are facing some headwinds on the reauthorization bill. Congress needs to find, I don't need to find it, but Congress needs to find about $150 billion over this next 5-year bill. So that's going to be something that they're looking to either increase the gas tax, which is probably not going to happen, or find some other fees to pay for the next reauthorization bill, or they can just take it from the general fund, which they do quite often. There's some headwinds when it comes to transit funding. If you've been reading the news, Chairman Graves on the Transportation Committee keeps on referring to this as a highway bill, and doesn't really talk about the transit side of things. And the Trump DOT just submitted some guidance on what they want to see in the next reauthorization bill, which limits the flexibility on some highway funds, the highway flex funds, which right now help communities use some of that funding for transit projects. They want to stop that and just require FHWA highway money to stay in the highway bucket. And that's going to have a really negative impact on a lot of communities across the country as well when it comes to those flex funds for transit projects. So we'll be looking at that as Congress works to reauthorize the bill. There's also a number of opportunities available in this next reauthorization bill. NEPA reform. We know that things could be built faster and cheaper, and I think there's some bipartisan consensus around making that happen. Safety, this has been a big priority for the Trump administration, is make sure that transit is more safe for the riders and drivers. And so we're interested to see if there's going to be additional investments put into that issue area. And then the Trump administration is a little bit of a wild card here to see if Trump, who's a builder, wants to build things. This is the #1 bill that he can put his weight behind to say, I want to do something bigger and better than the Biden administration did. The Biden administration passed the largest infrastructure package since the 1950s. Will the Trump administration say we want to do more and better than the previous administration? That's yet to be seen. He hasn't been talking too much about the infrastructure or the transportation package yet, but as we get into the reauthorization year in 2026, it will be interesting to see if he takes that on as a priority in 2026. The timing for the reauthorization bill in the House is the Transportation Committee is expected to mark up their version of the bill in early 26, and they're trying to get it on the floor and passed on the House by spring of 26. The Senate's a little bit slower, as they are with everything. I'm a House guy, so I blame the Senate for things. The Senate's a little bit behind that schedule. They're likely to mark up a bill in the spring or summer, and they're going to try to get a combined package done by the summer of 2026. But as with every election year, next year's a midterm, passing a big bill is sometimes challenging because politics get in the way. And I'll talk about that a little bit in the next slide too. And this is the last slide here. Just talk about what's happening in Washington, D.C. Obviously, we had the longest shutdown in the history of our government. We got out of that What's interesting in my mind is I would think just at a 30,000-foot level, the Republicans won on the policy issue. They opened the government and they didn't really agree to too many changes to continue operating the government. But I think the Democrats you may see the Democrats winning more on the political side by elevating healthcare as an important issue in 2026. And if Republicans don't address that and some of the affordability issues that folks are concerned about, that might be more of a political win for Democrats going into the midterm election. In terms of appropriations, there are 12 appropriations bills that Congress needs to pass every year. As part of the bill to reopen the government, they passed 3 appropriations bills of the 12. So we have 9 more to go, and they need to pass those by January the 30th. It was good to see three of those bills pass. There were earmarks included in 2 of the 3 bills. There were only 2 of those that have earmarks in them, but the 2 that did have earmarks, they were included in there. And so we anticipate that that's a good trend setter for the remaining appropriations bills, that they will have those additional funding opportunities, direct funding opportunities for you all to work with your congressional delegation for transportation projects going into 2026. Court battles, there's about 80 lawsuits that are heading their way towards the Supreme Court, and you're going to be hearing a lot about very important decisions when it comes to sanctuary jurisdictions, which is very important to the state of California and jurisdictions within the state. Tariffs are on the docket as well, and impoundments. Impoundments are basically where the Trump administration is trying to unilaterally not fund programs that Congress has funded. Typically, you're not allowed to do that, but they're testing the limits of the law when it comes to impoundments, and Democrats are pushing back hard, and Republicans may start entering that discussion as well, as Congress's main role, as you all know, is to pass funding bills. But if the any administration doesn't spend that money, there are laws to force them to spend that money, and the Trump administration is trying to go around that. So the Supreme Court's going to be making decisions on that as well. The last subject I have here is just the midterm election forecast and the balance of power. Right now, it's really, really tight in the House and the Senate. There's a 3-seat majority in the House of Representatives by Republicans. There's a 3-seat majority in the Senate for Republicans. The midterms right now, Democrats are feeling pretty good about their prospects for the midterms in 2026 and taking back the House of Representatives. The Senate, Republicans are feeling pretty good about maintaining their majority in the Senate. It's a really tough map for Democrats to try to win in some of the seats that are up this year. But it's going to be very interesting, and don't like to do too many forecasts, but it's something that we're obviously keeping a close eye on, and it's going to be front and center coming into the congressional cycle with transportation reauthorization and other big major bills. If they don't get things done by the summer or spring of 26, it's really difficult to get big bills passed when you're going into an election season, because neither parties start to position themselves for political discussions in the midterms and try to obviously take back power or maintain power, depending on who you are. So it's going to be a very fascinating and interesting year. The elections in a couple of weeks ago in Virginia and New Jersey, here in California with Prop 50, they showed signs that there was some pushback against the Trump administration. And if that level of Democratic support exists in 2026, there's a chance that Democrats could have a wave election, but obviously we still have a long way to go to see what happens there. And I think Republicans are trying to rebalance their positions to focus more on affordability going into the midterm elections. So I tried to keep that within 10 minutes. I hope I accomplished that. Close enough. But I'm curious if there's any questions, or Danielle, if you had anything more to add.
Okay, well, thank you for the report. Are there any questions from the board? Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for that report. Just kind of a general question. Secretary Duffy has been reported to withhold funding to California for transportation. Do you know if any of that will include public transit funding if it is withheld?
So there is my understanding is about 200 FTA bus and bus facility grants that are being reviewed across the country. Some of those are in California. Most of those are still going through the process. There's been a lot of communities or transit systems that received low-no grants, which is like battery electric buses or hydrogen buses, where the Trump administration and Secretary Duffy are encouraging those applicants to review those grant requests and to modify those to switch to hybrid buses or diesel or CNG. And those have, when the entities have agreed to do that, that has sped up the process a bit. Some of the larger projects, like in New York City with the Gateway project, and Chicago are rail projects. They're holding up funding for those projects as well. I think the high-speed rail project here in California is going to have a really tough road to hoe with this administration, and that might be put on hold for quite some time until there's a new administration. But it's kind of a project by case-by-case basis. What I will say is, when it comes to grant awards, I think there's a lot of folks that are in Democratic states that are worried about grant allocations coming out of the Trump administration and how they're going to award those projects. We are already hearing the Bus and Bus Facility program is going to be announcing awards tomorrow, or what's today, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. We have already heard from many through the Bus Coalition that projects in blue states and Democratic states are getting awarded. And so, but we do want to see how the balance of awards are going to be spread out. There's $1.5 billion in competitive grants through the Bus and Bus Facility program. And if they're targeted mostly towards Republican states, I think that's going to be alarming and cause some concern. But the initial readings of what we've been hearing is it sounds like it's being spread out to blue and red states. But we're keeping a close eye on how those funds will be distributed and what projects are being frozen at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Oh, go ahead.
Councilmember Eisenberg is helping me with the mic. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubin. It's great to meet you and hear a little bit about your firm. You mentioned the prospect of NEPA reform. Could you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about the path you see going there? Is that something that will be narrow and targeted, or is it a more effective strategy that it's a blanket effort across different sectors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's going to be a big push, especially among Republicans, to do a significant NEPA reform. One thing that we're working on is more narrow is property acquisition. So if you all are, as a transit system, are trying to buy property to build a facility on, you need to go through a NEPA and SEPA review first. The Federal Highway Administration doesn't require you to do that at the federal level. You can buy the property first and then go through the NEPA process. And we've heard from a number of transit systems that it's really challenging, especially in areas like yours, where property values are going up. You locate a property, maybe it's adjacent to an existing facility. It makes sense to purchase property there. But then it takes 12 months, 18 months to go through the NEPA process. That land gets bought out underneath you because maybe people hear that there's interest in that property. The costs of that property go up, or you have to find new locations and then go through the NEPA process again. So NEPA property acquisition reform is getting a lot of traction from bipartisan members, but I think they're going to be looking at broader NEPA reforms as well. But we just haven't seen any legislative text on that front. But I do anticipate that the DOT is very interested in this, and they're going to have a whole section on NEPA reform. The question is, I think a lot of Democrats want to make sure that the environment is protected at the same time, but to do it in a smart way, but allow transit systems and on the transportation side as well, allow you all to move forward in a way that protects the environment, but also moves projects faster and cheaper, because that's a huge problem. The bipartisan infrastructure law that passed, they put so much money into infrastructure, and it's just taking so long to see those investments be realized in communities across the country.
All right. Any others? And I understand you'll be back next month to go into more detail on a legislative game plan and.
That's correct. It will be virtual, though.
Virtual, yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
next month in December, we'll be bringing our federal and state legislative platform for the 2026 year. So I'm going to have both our state and federal lobbyists provide just an update of kind of the state of the state and the state of the federal government.
Okay, then I'll save my advocacy for that one.
Absolutely.
All right, if there's no other comments, thank you for coming down. And obviously Napa is here for you. So anytime you get to come by, swing by.
We'll take advantage of that as much as possible. Thank you so much.
Terrific, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so now we're moving to item 9.2. A presentation on the draft Plan Bay Area 2050 plus.
Yes, and I just wanted to introduce Michael Jermerod?
RG Gurmarad.
Gurmarod, who's with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and he will be presenting on draft Plan Bay Area 2050 plus. And just to remind the board, the MTC is our Metropolitan Planning Organization. And so any plans that we complete and do have to be consistent with Plan Bay Area 2050 plus. And that is why Michael is here to provide an overview of the plan that's out for draft comment right now.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to share an update on the draft Plan Bay Area 2050 plus, which is the long-range vision for transportation, housing, the economy, environment for the 9-county region. It is a limited and focused update from the plan that we adopted in 2021 that was adopted by the MTC and ABAG board in late 2021. Next slide. We kicked off the 2050 plus effort in the middle of 2023, and since then, both MTC and ABAG have taken 3 actions, and we've had 3 rounds of public engagement. And we're currently in this final phase of engagement and really headed towards a 2026 action by MTC and ABAG. In October of this year, we released the draft plan, draft EIR, and draft implementation plan, and have a public comment period open through December 18th. We'll then produce a final plan, final EIR, and a final implementation plan and take those to our boards. Next slide. Plan Bay Area, which is our regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategy, has a number of federal and state requirements. The first of which is that we update it every 4 years. The second, that's a pretty significant one, is that we have to produce a fiscally constrained envelope for the transportation system and fit our transportation needs within that fiscal constraint. On the housing side, we have to accommodate future growth at all income levels. And then importantly for the environment, as part of SB 375, we have to meet a per capita greenhouse gas reduction target set by CARB and also meet some US EPA clean air standards. It's also important to note on the right what Plan Bay Area does not do, which is it does not override local land use authority, allocate money to specific projects and strategies, impose mandates, or propose specific legislation. Next slide. We do recognize that Plan Bay Area 2050 plus and the plans prior are plans, and that's really just the first step of the long process towards implementation. I've mentioned SB 375, which was passed in 2008, which really linked our transportation investments to a regional land use strategy, really to advance GHG and environmental goals. We highlight here a trend towards more focused growth in the region across the past 15 years. And on the right, we also highlight some of those investments in key priority development areas and priority conservation areas in Napa County. Next slide. The plan is really comprised of 35 strategies that are organized underneath elements and themes. And so within the transportation element, there are 3 themes that house 12 strategies. So they nest under maintain and optimize the existing system, create healthy and safe streets, as well as build a next generation transit network. There are 8 housing strategies that nest under protect and preserve affordable housing, spur housing production at all income levels, and create inclusive communities. On the economy front, there are 6 strategies focused on improving economic mobility for residents in the region, as well as shifting the location of jobs. And then finally, in the environment element, we have 3 themes that house 9 strategies that focus on reducing risk from hazards, expanding access to parks and open space, and reducing climate emissions. Next slide. I mentioned at the top that Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus was a limited and focused update. Some of those areas where there were significant updates was really recognizing the changes in the region post-pandemic. So looking into how remote work is shifting travel behavior in the region, and looking at how ridership declines have occurred across the region. Those pieces, as well as other impacts, really over the past few years, resulted in a much smaller funding envelope for the transportation system. So we anticipated $80 billion less over this 25-year planning horizon. A bunch of those factors combined towards really having a highlighted effort on transit, given just how much had changed in the past few years post-pandemic. And that was housed under an initiative called Transit 2050 Plus. It was a co-management model where we worked directly with transit operators in the region to really reimagine the transit system post-pandemic. And out of that, there was really a focus on safety, transit frequency, and rider-focused improvements. The last piece I'll highlight here is incorporated into the plan is the first ever resilience project list, which is a project we've worked with the San Francisco Bay Conservation Development Commission on, and I'll highlight that on a future slide. Next slide. So really zooming into the kind of housing and job component of the plan and the focused growth nature, which is really a carryover of, this will be the fourth iteration of Plan Bay Area. We anticipate that 95% of new households over the next 25 years will locate inside the planned growth geographies, and over 70% of new jobs. In Napa County, it's relatively consistent with the county's current share of population and jobs. And so 5,000 new households and 5,000 new jobs are anticipated in Napa County through our plan. Next slide. There's 35 strategies, but I've just pulled out a few to highlight here. The first is operating and maintaining the existing system. So the vast majority of the resources that we forecast go towards maintaining what we have on the ground today. Also highlighting strategy T6 to modernize freeways and interchanges. Pulled a photo there for SR 29. And then strategy T11 is an example of what came out of that Transit 50 Plus initiative. And it encompasses a range of investments to enhance transit frequency, capacity, and reliability. I mentioned on the prior slide a little bit about the growth framework and growth geographies, and those strategies are really focused around creating a greater mix of housing and land uses within those locations. Strategy EN8 is focused on expanding primarily electric vehicles, but also other electric modes through buyback programs, as well as EV charging infrastructure. And I'll talk a little bit about adaptive sea level rise on a future slide. I'll also just mention that strategy EN2 has a wildfire component where we focus on identifying the needs for wildfire home hardening for existing structures across the region. Next slide. So I've mentioned that funding envelope for the transportation system, and it's still a lot of money, but as I mentioned, most of it is going to operate and maintain the existing system. Of the remainder, 16% of that funding envelope is committed to enhancements to transit, another 8% for bike and ped improvements, as well as local streets and climate initiatives. And then less than 2% of the plan, the transportation project list is earmarked for freeway projects, and less than 1% is for adding capacity to freeways. Next slide. So for the first time, Plan Bay Area has incorporated a resilience project list that's really an inventory of locally developed and vulnerable portions of shoreline across the region. And we really see it as an important way to elevate this emerging need through our long-range plan. It's not a required element of our plan, but it's a way that we can start to organize all of the local planning work that's happening in the region. Within Napa County, there are flood protection projects as well as wetland restoration, and that's also where the longer-term adaptation for State Route 37 is. Next slide. I'll mention that, Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus is a visionary planning document. If it were implemented, these are the types of outcomes that we would anticipate by the year 2050. So a pretty significant reduction in housing and transportation costs, as well as an increase in the share of households and jobs that are near and accessible by transit. Jumping down to the second line, a doubling of the share of those who commute using transit, biking, or walking. And then importantly, that 21% per capita reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, specifically from light duty cars and trucks, is that CARB specific metric that's a key piece of the plan. Next slide. A piece of the plan that is the most dynamic at this point in the process is the implementation plan, where we really work to identify what are the actions MTC and ABAG can take over the next 5 years to advance this long-range vision. And so there are over 60 actions that are in the plan. You can go to the Plan Bay Area website and pull out the implementation plan specifically and see what those actions are. We've summarized a few of those here, including some funding tasks around both transportation and housing measures. On the planning front, we do plan to continue to analyze the post-COVID shifts in travel and remote work and land use patterns. And then I'll also mention that both MTC and ABAG have launched kind of recent initiatives like Clipper Bay Pass and regional wayfinding programs. And so in some cases, it's not about launching a new program, but really continuing to deliver the programs that have recently launched at the agencies. Next slide. So we have a public comment period open through December 18th. Early 2026, the plan is to take a final plan, EIR, and implementation plan to MTC and ABAG policymakers for action. And I'll just note, we do update this plan every 4 years. It takes us a while to do it. So by middle of next year, we'll be kicking off the next plan. I think the piece to mention here is that it will be a major update. So this is a limited and focused update. A lot of what's in the plan is carried over from the plan that was adopted in 2021. And at the start of this process, there'll be a lot more on the table for kind of rich discussion about what we want this plan to look like. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for that report. Do we have any questions from the board? Director Narvaez.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Really great report, and a lot to cover in quite a bit of time. But one thing that stood out was the reduction of housing and transportation costs by 25%. And the report says 50% for low-income households. I mean, that's been a tough nut to crack for many jurisdictions. So I'm just really interested to see how that cost reduction will take place, what the plan is. In addition, with 21% reduction GSG, because a lot of times those things don't go hand in hand. We have a lot of, for example, here, we have a lot of homes that are older homes that we're looking to reduce the carbon footprint, but then that's a higher cost. So really interesting to see how this draft's going to address those two items and help us address that at the local level too. So I'm going to be going through that draft, and hopefully we can find some golden nuggets that will help us here. Thank you.
Any other reports or comments from the board? Then I'll also throw out if there's any comments from the audience, either here or online. Okay. Well, this was mostly for information. So I appreciate the report, and I think your Director Narvaez is right. We should check it out in more detail and figure it out. The outcomes seem very impressive, but they do seem rather ambitious. So it might be worth it to drill down to see what the rationale and what we got to do to make those outcomes happen. But thank you for the report.
Thank you.
All right, we are now at consent. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent calendar less item 10.8. Director Narvaez, motion.
Second.
Williams seconded. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Perfect. We are now moving on to item 11.1, the travel behavior study. Drell, welcome.
Thank you. All right, can you hear me? Good afternoon, Chair Joseph and members of the board. My name is Adrell Coleman. I'm an associate planner here at Napa Valley Transportation Authority. And I'm presenting to you today agenda item 11.1, which is on the travel behavior study. And this comes with a recommendation to accept and file the 2025 study reports. And I have a short presentation for you today. So this is the third iteration of the travel behavior study that NVTA has conducted. The purpose of these studies is really to analyze and understand how residents, workers, and visitors travel throughout Napa County. Essentially, who's using the road, what's the purpose of their trip, what's their origin, what's their destination. For the 2025 study, that purpose remains the same, but this time around we were really interested in understanding some of the changes to travel patterns since the pandemic occurred, especially with the impacts of the shifting commute patterns with the evolution of hybrid work and work from home options. And then in past studies, we've relied on more traditional methods. For the 2014 study, we conducted surveys, we installed cameras to collect license plates. For the 2020 study, we exclusively used location-based services or mobile phone data. This time around, we were looking at a more modern, blended approach that integrates big data sources along with our employer survey that we conducted and some new traffic counts. Next slide. And so to capture this post-pandemic baseline, the methodology was to design a new data collection plan using a mix of tools and different sources. So we have Replica, which gives us a big picture view of how people travel across the region. We have Streetlight, which uses anonymous GPS or connected vehicle data to really show how people are moving on our county roads. We have Zara, which tracks visitor travel patterns and shows where our visitors' home locations are across the United States. We have our employer survey, which was conducted. We collected about 700 responses with details provided on home and work locations, work schedules, trip purposes, their habits, travel modes, and demographics. Then we collected traffic counts at all of our key gateways, key corridors, major intersections, and then we collected some additional data from their MTC. Their MTC had a joint partnership with the Bay Area Council and conducted a return to office survey for employees. And then we used some census data. Next slide. And so these are the key findings from the study. So on the demographic side, we have 4% reduction in residents, so population decrease. We have 5% decrease in resident workers, So these are Napa County residents that are employed. We have a 5% decrease in employment. This could be due to various reasons, fewer residents, fewer jobs, fewer workers commuting into Napa County for work, people moving, people retiring. We had a 7% increase in Napa County residents working from home. We had a 6% decrease in imported workers. So these are workers that live outside of Napa County and commuted here for work. We had a 19% decrease in exported workers. So these are residents that work in other counties. And then we had a 5% decrease in total workers. So workers that live both in and outside of the county. And then as we move along to trip making changes, we had a 12% decrease in inter-county trips. So these are trips that start and end in other counties. We had a 23% decrease in trip interactions with Solano County. We had a 4% increase in trip interactions with Sonoma County. We had a 5% increase in internal trips. So these are trips that start and end within Napa County. Napa Bel Air Plaza, which is the top trip generator for Napa County, saw a 23% increase in weekday trips. I think the total is 28,000 daily or weekday trips for Bel Air Plaza. We saw a 9% decrease in average trip length. We saw a 9% decrease in Napa County generated VMT. So that could be due to people just having shorter trips in general or mode shift. We saw an increase in pass-through trips. So these are trips that use our roads to reach other destinations, but don't make a stop here in Napa County. So if someone is traveling between Lake County and Sonoma, Lake County and Solano, or Solano and Sonoma. And then that increases during the summer up to 31%. And then overall traffic is pretty much the same as the last study that was conducted, and we saw no change. There was a total of 418,000 weekday trips, which is on par with the 2020 study. So next slide. And so this is just an overview of visitors that travel to Napa County. So these are the tracked home locations of devices of people that visited Napa County for fall 2024. So as we can see, Napa County is still a nationwide destination, and we receive visitors from all over the United States. Next slide. And so all the information is available from the study in two final products. First, we have the full written report that was included in your board packet. It will also be published on our website for the public to access. And then second, we created a online visualizer. This is a user-friendly interactive database that lets you explore the data that was collected throughout the study by jurisdiction, by location, by time of day, by season. So you have a lot of ways to customize what you're looking for. Next slide. And then so I did prepare just two snapshots from the visualizer tool. Let's see. So this is focused on AM peak or morning travel patterns. So if you look at the top upper left corner box there, these are the overall trips for Napa County in the morning. So we have 90,000 or just over 90,000 total trips. We have 62 intra-Napa County trips. So these are trips that start and end within Napa County. Those make up the majority share of trips for the morning. We have just under 16,000 trips into Napa County. So those are people that are coming from other counties to here. We have 9,000 trips that start here and that end in other counties. And then we have nearly 4,000 trips that pass through our roads every morning. And then, so if you look at the box in the upper right corner, this is the origin destination pairing by city. So if you can take any jurisdiction, let's use Calistoga, for example. So this is basically stating that 3,300 trips per weekday morning start in Calistoga, which makes up for 5% of all trips that start in Napa County. And then 3,200 trips in the morning end in Calistoga, which represents 4% of trips that end in Napa County. And then if you look at the bottom box, that's just further breaking down the OD pairings between our jurisdictions. So we can use Calistoga as an example again. So if you look at the jurisdictions listed vertically, that's the origin. And then if you look at the jurisdictions horizontally going across, that's your destination. So if we look at Calistoga, we can see that 1,500 trips end in, out of the 3,300 trips that start in Calistoga, 1,500 of those trips end in Calistoga, 100 trips end in Engwin, 350 trips end in St. Helena, 10 trips end in Yountville, 210 trips end in the city of Napa, 0 trips end in American Canyon, 770 trips end in unincorporated Napa County, and then 350 trips go through the Gateway. So Gateway is pretty much the exits to any of the other neighboring counties. Next slide. And so this is pretty much the same thing for PM or early afternoon, evening travel pattern trips. You have 127,000 trips during that time. 96,000 of those trips are start and end within Napa County. 11,000 trips are coming into Napa County, and then 17,000 trips end or elsewhere in other counties. And then we have 3,500 pass-through trips. And then so this time around, if we can take city of St. Helena. So we have 6,200 trips that start within St. Helena. So that represents 6% of all trips that start in Napa County, start in St. Helena during this time frame. And then 6,100 trips end there, which represents 5% of all trips that end in Napa County, end in the city of St. Helena. And so if you look at the OD pairs box at the bottom for the city of St. Helena, let's see, so 520 of those trips that start in the city of St. Helena end in Calistoga, 330 of those trips end in Engwin, 1,800 trips end in St. Helena, which is probably about a third of their total trips. 130 trips end in Yountville, 1,500 trips end in the city of Napa, 80 trips end in the city of American Canyon, 990 trips end in unincorporated county, 800 trips are gateway trips, so those are trips that travel or their end destinations in other counties. So Sonoma, Solano, Contra Costa, Alameda can vary. Next slide. And so how can this data be used? It can be used for a wide range of things, including our countywide transportation plan, which is the next iteration is underway. So it can inform it can help to identify some system needs and where future investments need to be made. We have the regional modeling or the SNABM model update, which kicked off a couple weeks ago. So that's our local travel model for Solano and Napa counties, and it's used as a travel forecasting tool. So the study can help provide updated trip patterns and origin destination data to build a more current and accurate model. The data from the study can also be used for grant applications for some transit and multimodal planning, corridor and local studies, and then to help monitor performance. Next slide. Sorry, that concludes my update. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One is the methodology, which I admit I read the report and, you know, I know more about methodology of travel behavior studies than I ever thought I would learn. But I'm wondering, a lot of this is we want to compare and see where things have changed.
Right.
But if the methodology is radically different each time we do the survey, my question is, how do we know that, for example, there was an increase in trips at home compared to the last cycle, if the reason we have the data today is because it's a much more robust, sophisticated modeling, whereas 5 or 10 years ago, it was a little more, you know, not as robust. So I guess that's my first question. How do we know we're really comparing apples and apples over time?
Yeah, I mean, for this time around, I think that's one of the reasons why we use different sources. I think last time around we used location-based services almost exclusively. That is proven to be not as reliable this time around. And so to really strengthen our case, we use multiple sources to be able to cross-reference and verify the data that we're getting from some of these big data vendors.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, I think it boils down to the most recent data is probably the more accurate one, and prior cycles may not be as accurate. So the comparison over time maybe need to take a grain of salt with it, but at least we're getting more accurate information, and that is important. And which leads me to the next question, which is, what are the biggest standout data points in your mind? And how do we deal with it as policymakers?
That's a great question.
I can take a stab at
Or-
that.
Okay.
Adrel. I would say
apologize.
I would say one thing that really stood out to a lot of us is that, you know, traffic is very much returned, and I think we all feel it like anecdotally. And I guess this also gets to your first point is, well, like, why are we doing this? You know, or not why are we doing this, but how do we make sure the data is accurate? I mean, this is the best data that we have at our fingertips right now for like the most economical price, I guess you would say. And what we've noticed is that traffic is very much back, but VMT is a lot lower. And we actually saw that in our mid countywide transportation plan report as well, is that VMT is lower, but trips are up. And so we notice, you know, also with our commute patterns that they're a little bit more elongated and spread out. So people are making a lot more trips during the day. Maybe that's because, you know, almost like 10% more of our population is just working from home now. And so it's almost kind of this way that people are moving about. And so, you know, people are making more trips during the day. They're shorter trips, but they're just more traffic periods have been elongated, and then there's more midday traffic. But VMT is a lot lower because people are not making those long commute trips, or if they are commuting to work, they're commuting to work 2 days a week or 3 days a week, not 5 days a week. So VMT and total vehicle miles traveled is lower, but the congestion is still there on a local level. So I think that's one really interesting thing that we can take from this study and look at how, you know, in our countywide transportation plan, we're planning for that kind of outcome. Like as transportation planners and engineers, we always look at peak period,
Right.
peak AM period and PM period as commute volumes. So now how are we changing how we're studying traffic and studying how people move amongst the transportation system? How are we making our transit service also kind of sync up with that kind of trip making, right? Because before we would also say on a transit aspect, if you asked us before the COVID pandemic where we should put our resources, it would have been put them in your commuter service.
Right.
Bolster your commuter service. That is going to be your bread and butter. What we're finding now is that is not our bread and butter. Where we are seeing a lot of transit trips is on our county-wide regional service, our 10 and 11, that just go up and down the valley. And that is our bread and butter service for our transit system. That is where we are seeing 70,000 trips a quarter, as you'll see in our transit report for the quarter. But yeah, so that would be the biggest standout for us of how we are going to change how we plan for transit and transportation based on how people are traveling different on our road.
Okay, thank you. And one other thing that stuck out, the significant reduction in trips going into Solano County. And I'm thinking most of those are probably American Canyon people shopping in Solano and probably Costco, and the fact that there's a Costco in Napa. I just wonder if American Canyon has literally tipped the scales by saying, okay, I'm going to go to the Napa Costco because it's almost equal distance. And so just curious to see what the impact of Costco is, because I think that, to me, the reduction in trips to Solano seemed to be an American Canyon thing. But yeah. Oh.
I think the timing of the opening of Costco and when we collected the data, that may not be the case, but we can look into that because it was fall, or it only accounted for a portion of the collection. Maybe that was it. The Costco opened in October of 24, I believe. So.
Yeah, we collected the
Yeah.
data October, November of last year, so. But I know there was a new Costco that opened in Solano County, I believe, too, so that could have an effect.
Well, at any rate, thank you for the report. I know there's others who want to talk, so I will start with Director Williams.
Thank you. And that goes to my question. What was the time frame when the data was collected? And it sounds like it was at the end of the last calendar year.
Yeah, so
almost a year ago.
yeah, almost a year ago. So it was mostly between October and December of 2024, so fall of 2024.
And do you expect, is there a likelihood that the data collected would be different if it were collected at a different time of year, say in the summertime instead of towards the winter time? Is there likely to be much of a difference, and was the data collected previously in previous years, was that also in the winter or fall collection, or does that matter? Do you have any idea about that kind of thing?
So compared to previous studies, we did collect the data around the same time just to be able to keep it consistent. We did look at other seasonal variations when we did the study. So we did also look at data from spring and then summer, and then compare that with fall as well.
So which data are we seeing here? Is that the fall data?
So this is all from fall 2024.
Danielle?
Yes, this is all from fall of 2024 for the most part, but there are some data sources like the NREX data and some of the location-based services that give us large snapshots. So a lot of the detailed data, the traffic counts, which are very accurate because we went out and, counted traffic for a week time period in November, put out, was it cameras or by cameras, counted license plates. So that is really very high confidence level data. But some of the location-based services data we do pull from various seasonal periods, as Adrella mentioned. So we'll have summer total trip data, for summer, fall, winter, spring. So we do have that in the report as well. But the more detailed numbers you're going to see for like Calistoga, for instance, are going to come from October through December of 2024.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go around to Director Narvaez.
Thank you. The numbers the most was, excuse me, exported workers. I think you were talking about that. But, the question I have for that is the cause for that, because we have different reports from different agencies, different, research efforts. And my question is, exported workers went down 19%, which is a really big jump. So my follow-up question to that would be, is that because people found work locally? Is that because people moved to other counties and no longer, using, driving out of the county? And also, maybe check the labor reports with that. So I think there's an opportunity to cross-reference with other reports that in the county that we may have, specifically housing, with some of transportation, because I think a lot of that could be helpful to collaborate with. Because that would help us, not just here, but in other places, how we make our decision with housing and transportation. That's a big number. And then the summer pass-through traffic, that's, I didn't write down the number for that, but I'm kind of wondering, 31, I wonder why are they not coming here? Like, where are they going? What's some of those doing that we're not doing? That they're just going right through that, but not stopping here? I mean, what do we not have that we're not capturing that? That, might be somebody driving. I know it's kind of funny, but I'm thinking, I'm kind of a little insulted here. Like, where are you guys going? So maybe they live in Solana and work in Sonoma, maybe, I don't know. But that's something to kind of look at, right? Because we're missing something there. But and I just wanted to add, because our City of Napa did economic development team came out with some indicators that we had 18.1 million unique visitors, daily visitors, between 24 to 25. And that's people that stayed over 10 minutes that live beyond 50 miles away. So there's other reports that can give you some really good insight on what's going on with visitors and workers. But that number right there, I'm really interested to know a little bit more of what's causing 19%.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that we can definitely look into, but just looking at the other demographic changes, it somewhat fits. Your population is down overall by 4%. Resident workers has decreased. And then people that live here are working from home more too. So that gives them less of a reason to travel outside of the county for work. But that is definitely something that we can look into a little bit more.
All right, Director Doring.
Just a couple, thank you for the presentation, excellent presentation. Just a few clarifying questions. I haven't had a chance to really delve into the whole report, and I will, of course. What is the definition of working from home?
I think it's people that work from home at least 2 days a week minimum.
Okay. All right.
But I'll double check that.
Okay,
and
that's
follow up with
interesting.
you, but
And then do you, I understand there was a 5% decrease in employment here. And I'm just wondering if there's a predominant sector that plays a role in that decrease.
that I don't know about.
Okay, it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to find that out.
Yeah.
We only have a couple of predominant sectors, so I'm just
Right.
wondering which one it is, or if it's just spread across all of the employment in general. So be interesting to look at that. If that's not in the study, maybe in the study, I'll take a look.
No problem. And I'll be more than happy to follow up with you on both of those too.
Director McKay.
Thank you. So for the inter-county trips, I noticed we're down 12%, but then the internal trips were up 5%. Can you explain the difference of those two? And then my second question, still on that slide, is any report that we've ever seen that involves traffic around Napa Bel Air Plaza, since we all shop there, it's always the highest. And are there any plans in the future that can alleviate? Obviously, we don't own the parking lot, right? But that is a really hectic area and it's dangerous.
Yeah, so I'll take the first part. Inter-county trips are essentially trips that either start or end in Napa County. So you could start in Napa County and end in Solano, or you could have a trip that starts in Solano and ends here. So that overall is down by 12%, which kind of fits the decrease in exported workers. So yeah, I can look into that further, but and then the internal trips is up by 5%. So that just means more people are making their trips within their own neighborhoods or within the county itself. So and that kind of fits with you have more residents working from home and so on and so forth. As far as the Bel Air Plaza, I'm not aware of any.
I'm sure the city would not want us to curtail traffic at the Bel Air Plaza, but yeah, it's but yes, I would agree that parking lot is a nightmare sometimes. We do have I think that is sort of, I guess, representative of that our transit system, this Route 10 and 11 that serve both the Trancas and the Saw School corridor. Those are some of our, most frequented stops right there in front of Bel Air Plaza and across the street, as well as the Redwood Park and Ride, which is walkable to the Target and Whole Foods and Trader Joe's area. So it is just one of our largest, or is our largest trip generator, along with the South Napa Marketplace down here on Saw School and Napa.
Those stops are a little bit awkward, obviously, with the backup of traffic, but convenient for the riders, so.
Yeah, the good thing is that there is a pull out for the bus
I'm
on,
behind it.
yes, on the east side, yeah.
Thank you.
Right, and then Director Eisenberg.
Thank you. So the definition of a pass-through trip, entering anywhere in Napa County and then exiting Napa County anywhere
Correct, without making any stop.
without
Here-
making a
here
stop.
in Napa County, yeah.
Well, I know anecdotally, I know where a lot of that pass-through traffic happens. It's from Lake County and then exiting in Calistoga towards Sonoma County. This is a huge amount of traffic that we can see. I was wondering if there is a way where that particular route can be tracked for the cars that are doing just that.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can take a look at using the visualizer. So I'd be more than happy to follow up with you on that.
Because that could be valuable as we look to perhaps improve that intersection between where Calistoga goes off towards Sonoma County, and you can just see the traffic line up from the north before it turns off to the west towards Sonoma.
Good point. Director Cottrell.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to follow up on both Bernie's point about what do we not have here that is making people go through, and also Kevin, your point that we know that there's a specific pass through that's actually very few Napa County miles, but that is probably contributing a lot to that number. So I would second that suggestion of, I was thinking at least a regional breakdown of the pass through trips so that we could see sort of northern section, middle section, southern section, or something like that, I think would give us some more visibility into how people are moving through the county. So thank you for this report.
And on that, I think it gets to the visualizer program. I think that.
Yeah, there's the spreadsheet. It's a database that Adrell was referencing. It's called it's our visualizer or Tableau, and we will send that link out. It's public. It's on our website as well as the report, but we will send out the link to the visualizer, and you can actually drill down specifically to Calistoga, look at your specific origins destinations, where your trips are being generated for each of the jurisdictions. So we'll send that around.
So I think a lot of those, I mean, we can all imagine what's going on, and I think that visualizer, I'm hoping, will give us the ability to sort and parse and analyze ourselves into a happy state.
Have specific questions, like if something's not making sense, please feel free to reach out to staff.
Okay. Any more director questions or comments? Anybody out in the audience who would like to weigh in? Okay, then I will wrap this up, although we do need to take action to formally accept and file so I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Doring, Narvaez, eventually I will learn how to pronounce it correctly. Sorry. Motion and second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Now we're to 11.2, the Napa Valley Transportation Authority fiscal year 25-26 first quarter financial review.
All
Take
right.
it away.
We have a PowerPoint presentation coming up. Okay, good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. My name is Antonio Honorado, and I am the Director of Finance for the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. So for this item, it's an informational only item, but we will provide an overview of the agency's first quarter financial position for the year compared to its annual budget. The memo itself and the attachment with the memo provides a more in-depth analysis, but for today, we'll have a brief PowerPoint providing some context to the numbers. All right, next slide, please. So just to give the board members and then some of the newer ones a little bit of background, NVTA actually oversees 3 funds. We oversee what the Congestion Management Agency, which we often call the CMA. In accounting lingo, we call it the general fund. We also oversee the public transit fund, and that's where all our public transit operational financial transactions occur. And then we also oversee a 3rd fund. It's called the Transportation for Clean Air. That fund is a passive fund. It does not get included into the agency's operations. And so the information is in the packet, but we often don't talk about that fund unless there's a question regarding that fund. I have here transit capital, and that's not a fund specifically. That is a budget, and it relates to transit capital itself. And for that, it's a standalone budget. We don't commingle it with agency operations, and that's why you see it as a separate box here at the lower box. So for the general fund, the annual budget is nearly $16.5 million. For the first quarter, our first quarter is usually our slowest quarter in terms of financial activity. It's because we're trying to close out our fiscal year end for the previous year. And the new fiscal year, it actually doesn't start on an accounting basis until mid-August. And so we're ramping up the first quarter of the year, and then for the previous year, first quarter year tends to have financial transactions that we just haven't caught up yet. For the revenues itself, the first quarter actuals, we received revenues of $646,000 compared to expenses of about $1.1 million. So it appears that this is a deficit. It's a little misleading. Our revenues for the general fund comes in on a reimbursement basis. However, we pay our expenses up front. So it's really a timing issue. We expect to catch up at the end of the current quarter, at the end of December. So those 2 numbers, the revenues expenses, should be closer together the next time I report out on the second quarter's financial data, mid-year update, basically. On the public transit side, for total operations, the annual budget is $22 million. For the first quarter, revenues came in at about $5.6 million, and expenditures come in at about $3.7 million. Public transit, the revenues come in a little bit differently from the general fund. So for the general fund, we get most of our revenues on a reimbursement basis. For public transit, we actually get advances, TDA advances, to help with cash flow and to help with operations. So that $5.6 million represents TDA advances to help with cash flow and to pay for our public transit services. The expenditures themselves we'll see it in a couple slides, but the $3.7 million is really our purchase transportation contract that we have with our 3rd-party provider, as well as administrative fees and other personnel costs also. As you can see, the utilization is running around 20% for revenues and expenses for public transit. That's about right, because most of the costs are fixed. We know what they are. So, you're talking about 20-25% per quarter to make up to that 100%. Again, revenues and expenses, those will smooth out over the next few months and a few quarters. So when you see this little bit of a deviation, it's really because it's more of a timing issue than it is actual savings or are there really cost overruns involved. And then as I mentioned, for transit capital, we have a set aside budget of $3.1 million. This budget is really dependent on when projects start in the current quarter. As you can see, we only have about $89,000 in costs for the quarter. It's because we haven't started on some of our bigger capital projects, mainly the Redwood Park and Ride, which we will bring board a contract early next year. We also have about $1 million set aside for bus purchases if we are able to procure some additional buses, and about $1 million for upgrades and improvements at various locations like bus shelters and just various enhancements to some of our facilities. All right, next slide, please. So this is more of a pie chart of what we just seen in terms of numbers. Revenues for the CMA for the general fund came in about $646,008. Now, this is mainly comprised of two sources. One was we received a payment for the Vine Trail for, the Vine Trail has ended, but we're still getting some revenues and we're still seeing some expenditures. But for the most part, the Vine Trail is over, but there are still some incoming revenues for that. And the other portion of that is really membership contributions from our member jurisdictions. So that's the first quarter. In the second quarter, there'll be a lot more activity in terms of different revenue streams, and I'll explain that in the next update. On the expenses side, as I mentioned, about 1.1 million for the quarter. For the quarter itself, more than half was really our personnel costs for the agency, running the agency staff. We're down 2 vacancies, but we are almost a fully staffed agency now. But for the quarter itself, the expenditures comprise mostly of personnel costs. Consulting services, those are special projects. Again, these special projects are based on a schedule. First quarter, we start ramping up, and so consulting services in this case was about 188,000 a year. Mainly, it was from some payments to the Office of Traffic Safety, I believe. That was the Michelin report that we heard last month, and we are doing some work at airport over there, SR 2912. For the alternatives analysis. And there are some expenses related to improvements down in American Canyon on the SR 29 corridor. So those are our consulting services. And the remaining 19%, about 20% is for just to administer the agency itself, overhead costs, utilities, maintenance, legal costs, things of that nature. So agency expenses. Next slide, please. For public transit, you saw these numbers, explained it to you a little bit more. But as I mentioned, the $5.6 million in first quarter revenues comprises mostly of TDA advances. Whatever we don't use with those TDA advances at the end of the year, we put back into the trust fund, the TDA trust fund for future reallocation back for transit operations. So these advances, $5.6 million, it'll normalize out in the next few quarters when we get more reimbursements and less advances. State and regional funding usually comes from Caltrans, small amount, 7%. In totality, our pure fare box is running at 7%, which is actually a little bit better than the same time last year. In terms of total revenues, I think it was about 368,000 for the quarter, and last year was closer to like 350,000, so a small bump up in pure fare boxes. When I say pure fare boxes, I mean that's the money that people deposit in the fare boxes on all our buses except for the Yountville B. And a small part, a few $1,000s, was related to interest income and investment earnings on the revenue side. On the expenses side, as I mentioned, the costs are mainly fixed. Most of it's purchase transportation, and that's really industry jargon, meaning that's our third-party contract with Transdev Services. Comprises about 84% of the entire expenses for the quarter. Obviously, fuel, maintenance, insurance, those are recurring costs as well. For this, our first quarter composed about 10% of the overall expenses. We have some agency administration, and we have some personal costs rounding out, the rest of the budget for the year. Next slide, please. And that is actually it for the first quarter. As I mentioned, the first quarter has the financial activity is just not there. It will ramp up in the current quarter for the end of December 31st. And then next time I report, early next calendar year, you'll see a budget that's closely more related from the actuals to the expenses themselves. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
All right. Well, thank you for the report. Are there any questions from the board? No. Director Cruz.
Antonio, thank you for that report. This is in regards to the money streams for public transportation in general, in particular. So since pandemic, I know transportation ridership has been going down significantly. I don't know how it is now because I'm new to your group, of course. I see it's a small sliver of your money stream, 7%. How has it been going since then, since pandemic and now today?
So before the pandemic, our fare box was close to the 15%, which is our statutory minimum that we have to meet on a state level. Obviously since COVID, the passengers, before COVID, we had over 1 million passenger rides a year for the entire system. That includes not just the Vine, Yountville, American Canyon, Calistoga, and San Leon. Since then, the passenger count has dropped precipitously, and we are slowly gaining traction. We are slowly getting most of those passengers returning and attracting new passengers, but it's still a struggle to meet to get back to pre-pandemic levels. I mean, I think there's going to be more of a thorough answer from Rebecca Shank, our transit manager. She can explain a little bit more about the history of the fare box and the passengers since COVID.
Great,
I
thank
would
you.
just also mention that, so I think it's 15% that we have to meet, but that was waived during COVID and it has not come back. It's our fare box recovery ratio to be able to receive our state and federal funds that was waived. The TDA for our TDA funds, it was a waived requirement. And if you recall, former Executive Director Miller was on the Transit Transformation Task Force, which was a state task force looked at whose charter was to look at transit reform, look at transit funding statewide, because this is not a issue that's unique to Napa. And one of the things was looking at that TDA reform. An example that is often given by transit advocates or transit providers is American Canyon receives streets and roads funding, local streets and roads funding, regardless of your PCI score. So imagine if you were going to receive federal or state road funding based off your PCI score. So, transit providers, should not be held to that same kind of standard. There's other efficiencies and other ways that you can measure efficiencies for transit systems. And I think that's one of the things she was advocating for at the state level.
Great, thank you, Director Schmitz.
Okay. Director Williams.
Thank you. Could we return to one of the earlier slides that had the three funds, maybe the first or second slide? And then my question is, could you review for us what activities are associated with each of those three different funds?
Three.
Yes, we have a general fund, a CMA, a public transit fund,
So,
and
yeah,
transit capital. And why do we have?
that's the
this is a
second slide. Yeah, okay.
It's a basic question, but why do we have the three funds, and what activities are included in one fund and in the other? Just a summary, please.
Sure, absolutely. So for the CMA or the general fund, the activities included in there are our transportation planning activities. It's also where agency staff, where our personnel costs reside, and then agency administration. So our CMA, our general fund, it's transportation planning projects and programs, our personnel costs, and running the agency administration. That's what's the financial activity in the CMA. A large portion of that 16.5 million, about 11 of that are set aside for special projects. So if we don't deliver those special projects, then we don't spend the money. But this board gave us a spending authority to go ahead and begin those special projects when the resources become available. For public transit, it's pretty clear cut. It's our public transit operations. So Vine Go, our paratransit, and all the community shuttles. Those financial transactions are housed in public transit. And we usually, it's almost never that we can commingle the two funds, and split the cost or commingle the financial transactions. It's clear cut. You segregate your public transit activities separately from your transportation planning activities. Transit capital, I mentioned, it's not a fund, it's actually a set aside, a budget. And this is a capital budget. When we receive capital funding, we can't use it for operations except under very specific circumstances. But in most cases, we have to set aside our capital budget separately from our public transit budget. And that's why you see that third table down there with a separate standalone budget. But transit capital is actually part of the public transit fund itself. It's just financially, we separate out those two types of activities, one for operations and one for transit.
Just to follow up with that, for example, the Soskel Junction project would have been under the CMA general fund.
Because it's a transportation project, not a transit project. And we don't own that asset. We just delivered the project.
Okay.
So unfortunately for us, it's not a capital project. It's just a basic expenditure on our books.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that information. Any other questions? Anything from the public? Well then, this was just for information only, so thank you very much. And we're now going to move to our final presentation for the evening or afternoon. 11:3 Vine Transit Update. Yeah. We want to be done before evening, so
Yeah.
this is an afternoon event.
Right, perfect. Yes, we will make sure that happens. Okay, so thank you, Chair Joseph, members of the board. Rebecca Schenk, I'm the Director of Transit here at NVTA, and I'll be giving you an update on the first quarter from July 1 through September 30th. So same time period you just heard from the Finance Director, Antonio Honorado. So next slide, just to go through what we're going to cover today, upcoming schedule changes, along with all of the other Bay Area transit agencies, with the exception of a few. We change every year, basically the first week in August and then the second week in January. So we'll be changing again that second week in January. We'll go through outreach efforts. We'll review safety. I know that's something that had come up to the board. We're going to go over Taxi Script, which maybe is a program that we've operated since at least 2007, from what I can tell, but you might not be well aware of. It kind of fell more under commuter programs that we operated, and kind of in our reorganization at the beginning of this fiscal year, it's starting to transition to being part of the transit team and the transit programs that we offer. So I'll be touching on a different commute program at each of the next board meetings to kind of give you some perspective on where we are on those commute programs. And then we'll do our ridership update. So go ahead and skip ahead 2 slides, Laura. So our upcoming schedule change, as I mentioned, January the 11th. The 2 big things, I guess, really to emphasize on this. First being the Route G is going to be stopping at River Sound. So kind of our newest development. We'll be stopping just north of the Costco. Currently is a vacant lot, but that is where the affordable housing is projected to be. And it's been really helpful to have the HOA of the people that live there already kind of pushing the developer to allow us to stop here. So we think this will start to serve that new community well. And the other thing would be on the Route 10, as our Calistoga representatives are well aware. We just have one southbound stop on the Route 10. If you're at the bridge there, a lot of people are waiting for the bus at any given time. There are more people waiting for the bus at that stop than there are seats in that shelter. People can spill out into the sidewalk, et cetera. So putting this second, more temporary stop on Lincoln Avenue will allow people to disperse along that corridor better. Moving on to the next slide, what we're looking at is our outreach efforts and events. So you'll see our list, one to emphasize there, and where that picture comes from with my colleague Patrick Band, is the St. Helena Harvest Festival. Really well-attended event. If you've never been to it, I would encourage you to go. And I think one of the most encouraging things I heard from at that event was Francisco, who's the driver who has currently bid on the St. Helena shuttle, is quite popular and really goes over well. So you guys hopefully could all have a Francisco in your area to operate your shuttle. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, he's quite popular, and hopefully he bids on that next year. Maybe we can talk to Cheryl on that one. So hopefully he's happy too. Okay, on the next slide, what we're going to do is start into our safety report. And so we take a lot of preventative measures on our buses. So on each of our buses, there's a lytics, it's called a drive cam. There's a picture of it there. But essentially what it's doing is it's tracking everything that driver's doing, right? Is there following distance, looking out too close? Is the driver wearing a seatbelt? Is there some type of food or drink? Is the driver unbelted? What could be happening? And so let's just say that following distance is a little tight. That driver brakes too hard, or the safety manager over at TransDev gets a notification, hey, your driver just, you know what I mean, took this braking. If we're speeding on Laurel and we're going, 28 miles an hour or something, we know. So it gives us the good opportunity to kind of address things in real time if need be. And so we're looking at January through October of this year in terms of the frequency of the reports from this camera system. And so on the next slide, you'll see kind of what TransDev, and I thank them very much for this slide, kind of goes through their monitoring at any time, these 75 different operators, right? And how they're performing. If they have any what we call coachable events, things like, hey, you're following too close, your seatbelt wasn't on, things like that. And then it brings them back for coaching and it kind of talks through the results there. Something else on the next slide that the Lytix Drive Cam does is it tells us where, similar to that Michelin study that we saw last week or last month, sorry, when it was saying, hey, what are those maybe near miss events or places where events are happening? And by far for us, we have some close events at Soskel Ferry Road at Devlin. So if you know our bus maintenance facilities down on Devlin, we're traveling through that corridor coming north all the time. You may also know that that's a project where the stop signs have changed as of late. At the end of Soskel Junction, you've got 2 stop signs available. It's 3 I guess, yeah, 3 legs in total, not a stop sign at the other one. I know this project is on the county's public works program. I know there's not funding yet for it. They've made it through right of way, but from a transit perspective, this would be like our top priority project because this is something that's proven problematic intersection for us. Luckily, it has not resulted in a collision of any type. None of these have, right? These are just kind of risky events whereby we might be braking, have to brake more quickly than we would like. Then on the last slide, also we have to do reporting on safety. And so everything goes to the National Transit Database. We report monthly. There are major events and non-major events. Luckily in fiscal year 24-25, we had no reportable events that either fell into the major or non-major. That being said, there are some very minor events that don't fall into either category. For example, if we're driving down the road and our rear view mirror there is on the right and we hit a pole with that, for example, we lose the mirror. That doesn't fall into either of these categories. So it's not to say nothing happens, but nothing that falls into these reportable events luckily happened in the previous fiscal year. And I don't think too many transit agencies could say that. It's all on safety for right now. In terms of taxi script, which we'll go through next. So this is a program on the next slide that you'll learn is now being part of the Vine. And if you go on our website now, you look at our drop downs, our V-Commute program is that information is now available for there. If you go to the NVTA website and you go to V-Commute, it would now take you over to the Vine website. And so taxi script's a program, like I said, been around for a long time, really basic. It's easy to determine, are you eligible or not? It's not like paratransit. It's basically if you're 65 or older living in the city of Napa, or if you've also qualified for VineGo, you can utilize this program. And the idea is we basically cover up to half the cost of your taxi ride. So, you know, if we could cover if your ride's $20, NVTA is putting in 10, and you yourself are putting in 10. So that's a little bit overview of the program if you've never heard of it. On the next slide, it'll show you what the ridership has been in terms of the number of rides that have utilized the taxi script program by fiscal year. You'll notice 1920, right? Last year pre-COVID versus kind of where we are now. But generally, this is a pretty well-utilized program for us, something that maybe we haven't paid a lot of attention to, but has been tipping along. And the next slide just tells you what that equates to in dollars. So right now we'll cover up to $12, right, on your ride. When the board will get something in December that looks at maybe 18, because the senior citizens reminded me at the senior center that $12 in 2007 is not $12 in the year 2025, and they have a legitimate point there. So we'll look to update that. But this is the cost. So I mean, it's a low-cost program for us in terms of what we're covering. So in last fiscal year, we only spent just under $25,000 on this program, but we think there's an opportunity to spend a little more and provide more rides ostensibly. And so getting at that point on the next slide, so up until last month, you get a physical coupon. You would get like a little coupon. You could turn that coupon in, piece of paper, to the taxi driver. The taxi driver would accept that for, say, $10 of your ride, and then they would send it back to us at the end of the month, and we would give the taxi companies money for those coupons. Now we're just trying to do it in real time. So we moved from paper tickets to this prepaid debit card. That's an example of the debit card that we have. We'll be transitioning people over the next 12 months to this program, to this card, so they can use their coupons through the end of the fiscal year, but we'll be slowly migrating. Not too crazy in terms of a technology. It's just utilizing that card, same program, just the card. And then we don't have to worry about reimbursing the taxi companies every month. So easier on us administratively, and they don't have to wait to the end of the month to be paid. But having this card does give us some other options. We might be looking to utilize this program or this card for some other VCommute programs in the future. Next slide, in terms of ridership updates. So the biggest thing to know here, we had asked in the last presentation or two presentations ago about how, was it statistically consistent between the prior travel behavior studies and this one? In that case, right, there's variety, but in our case, we every 3 years go through all of our ridership data that we get through automated passenger counters, and we manually go through and say, hey, we rode this route, it had 15 people on it. Did the automatic passenger counter say 15? Did they say 18? Did they say 10? And adjust accordingly. So we found that we thought the automated passenger counters, based on our statistical analysis this time, in this 3-year period, was overcounting. So what we had to do then is make a statistical change in this quarter's ridership data, which brought it down about 4%. So now we think we're fully aligned with our automated passenger counters and reality. But what that means is that our ridership did drop from, say, the previous quarter in 24-25 first quarter to the first quarter in 25-26 as a result mainly of the statistical change. But still some highlights within this data is kind of our local rides in the city of Napa. If you look, that we did see an increase in ridership even after accounting for the statistical change in the routes A going over to Browns Valley, C traveling down that Jefferson corridor, and D going over to Shelter, Shirtlift. Then on the next slide, the data here, because we get our counts differently for VineGo and things, the data here wasn't affected by any type of change in our statistical methodology. So some good things to see. The St. Helena shuttle had higher ridership first quarter 24-25 to 25-26. The summer camp program in St. Helena utilized the shuttle for the first time. And when you break it down, that really accounts for the increase in trips. So I think that was a mutual benefit. We saw greater ridership and they got their kids in St. Helena to other places around town. Also, VineGo, which is our paratransit service, continued to see the quarter-over-quarter climb. We think there's really a demand there. Zaira, who's our new bilingual outreach coordinator, will really be focusing on trying to not only bring up that number of VineGo riders, but maybe have it more reflect our community in terms of we do see a lot more English speakers going through the process of their application and the interview process, and we'd like to see more Spanish speakers doing that. So we'll look to increase that number. And then finally, next, just annual accomplishments, things we had set out a set of goals for transit just for the year. We divide them into marketing, capital projects, bus upgrades. So one notable thing that we weren't able to do that I think will continue on to next year was participating in a one-seat ride program. Right now, if you go to sections of Vallejo utilizing paratransit, you'd switch from our system to Soltrans and then Soltrans back to us. We're going to make that a one-seat ride. Actually, at the December board meeting, MTC will be looking at funding us to do the one-seat ride. So even though it didn't happen this year, we think we'll be ready to go with this on January 2nd. And then things that we were able to do is we did deploy 14 new electric vehicles from Gillig. We had the chargers ready when the buses came. They had new CAT AVL systems on there that helped us with our overall real-time tracking. So that's something that came through. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Right. Well, thank you very much for the report. And I noticed you didn't highlight it, but it turns out American Canyon Transit is you're trying to get some funding so we can expand our hours, so.
Yes, and we'll see. We'll know in January. We submitted an application to you. Your service right now ends at 5:30. It would go to 7 PM on the weekdays, which we often hear is necessary. And then we'd also have Saturday service. So I think that in of itself will be a big win. And luckily, it's not like going after federal funding where you're a little nervous about it. This seems like a better percentage.
Well, we wish you luck, and I can assure you, I probably know the person who's been advocating it. She will be very happy to find out. Thank
She
you.
will.
We'll start at, well, actually, we're going to start at this end and go around. So
Great.
Director Cottrell.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I just had a quick question to go back to the place where, as you said, it would be a priority for MVTA to get the traffic improvement at the safety improvement. So it's at the end of Saskell Ferry?
It's where Saskell Ferry hits Devlin,
Devlin,
which is
yeah.
currently a T intersection. There is a county proposal, and I believe it's made through design and engineering to change that into a roundabout to
Yeah.
feed into the overall system. And so that would be helpful for us, we think, in changing the way that intersection functions.
Yeah, I thought I would just get an update from staff, so thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, I think the last presentation that you made for us, you mentioned some route adjustments that were going to make the system more efficient. Do you have a report on how those worked out?
Sure. So we basically did, the major thing is a change to the 11X. So we didn't have a full quarter yet in terms of saying, hey, that changed in August. So this represented about 6 weeks. So at the end of the next quarter, I think we'll report back because we'll have the full 2 quarters to look at. So pending.
Okay, Director Cruz.
Thanks for your report, Rebecca. I have a couple of questions. So first, I like that Scripps pass that you guys have. Do we have more like a regional pass? Let's say someone coming from Calistoga will want to go to American Canyon to Vallejo, to BART, something regional. Do we have something like that?
We do not have it regionally. When this program, I think was, initially conceived, it was for the city of Napa. So we essentially made the transition. I took it over to utilize this PEX card, but kept the program the same otherwise. But I think we can have the conversation of, okay, what other places can we go? And then we just have to constrain ourselves some ways. And like currently we use yellow cab and black tie. Where are they willing to go? Because I don't want to say, hey, you can use their taxi script, but no one will pick you up. So we're just going to have to kind of grow with them.
Understood. Thank you. My next question is your NTD reporting, National Transit Database reporting.
Yeah.
Cost for service for police activity and that such, is that also reported? And what is that looking like for our region here?
Yeah, we don't really have in the last fiscal year any police events. We don't have to report, say, if maybe the ambulance is called for an event that didn't occur on the bus. So let's just say hypothetically, worst case scenario, you have a heart attack on the bus, right? We stop the bus, they come. We don't report on that in terms of we didn't cause that event, if that makes sense. It wasn't like because of what bus was happening. So we don't have to report things like that to the National Transit Database. But if you had, for example, fallen and injured yourself in some way, we'd report on that. And an ambulance had been called. So we didn't have the ambulance called for anything that we, guess were responsible for in the last fiscal year. But we'll see what comes in future years.
Great, thank you.
Quick follow-up on the taxi script. So that is only for those 2 cab companies? So this isn't an Uber, Lyft kind of thing?
So that it had been at some point for 3 taxi companies, I believe one's dissolved. So it's like the 2 active cab companies. But by having this card now, it's just a matter of programming on the back end. So I don't like to overwhelm senior citizens and like, you've got a new card and a new program. But what we think we'll do next year is we'll open it up to Uber and Lyft so you could use that card to pay for that. And that would be an easy transaction. And we didn't have that option before because there's no way your Lyft driver was going to take that coupon and send it to finance 3 weeks later. So it opens it up to that possibility, very much so.
Perfect, thank you. And then Director Williams.
Thank you. There was a slide earlier that monitored driver behavior, I think, regarding seat belts and so on. And then the bottom line indicated a metric regarding coaching effectiveness. And can you tell us more about how do you measure that, first of all, and what does that entail?
Yeah. Actually, I might look to my colleague Cheryl with TransDev about coachable events. Come up and talk through those.
Hi, thank you. Cheryl Drake, General Manager for TransDev Services. So it is tracked electronically by driver. So we know the scores of every driver. We know who's been coached and when and by whom. And all of those coachable events have been coached by my safety and training manager. So it tracks like if they continue to have events. So if you see that we're 90% effective, then the coaching or the discipline, if you will, if it calls for that, is effective. So what the methods that we're using to retrain our drivers, to coach them through their events, to help them be successful so they don't continue to have events, or which also correlates to accidents and incidents, et cetera. So what we want to see as a company is a 90% effectiveness, and that's what we have, so.
And so I'm just, so the 90%, does that mean that within a certain time frame, that driver has no incidents, or how do you measure 94?
Has no more events. So in other words, doesn't have a following distance, doesn't have a hard brake, doesn't have an incident where they don't have their seatbelt on, or the way they take their turns, or speeding. So they are not having any events.
The question I think was, is there a time frame? Is
This
it
timeframe-
annual? Is it quarterly?
This one that is pulled for you has been from October to October. So this is the last year.
So over a year, so that would indicate that over a year's period, the driver had no further incidents that warranted attention. And that would, and so if all the drivers succeeded that way, then you'd have 100%, or if 9 out of 10 succeeded, you have 90%.
Well, it would be nice to be 100%, but in reality, they're driving buses in traffic, and we have to deal with the general public who don't drive exactly the way, a professional does. So sometimes those events are just caused because someone has cut them off, doesn't want to ride behind a bus, et cetera.
Why don't you explain a little bit about your zero club? Because they do have some drivers that have 100%.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do. So we have a safety action plan in place, and part of that safety action plan is also recognition for drivers who have zero events. And we call it the Zero Club. And then for any driver who has gone a year without any events, we call them our Zero Heroes. And we had 8 of those. We've just started the program, and when we went through, we have 8 of them. And we've recognized them with shirts, and NVTA has recognized them with gift cards. We've taken their photos, and we have them all showcased so that other drivers can look to it and go, oh, I want to be part of that. In addition to that, quarterly, I get a quarterly report on who has had 0 incidents during the quarter, and I recognize those individuals. And this last quarter, we had 46% of our drivers have 0 events. So giving them the recognition and watching this grow, I'm really excited to see how, that morphs and how many more drivers will get into the Zero Hero.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other comments from the board? Anything from the public? All right. Well, then I want to thank you for that report, and I appreciate all the new format where you're kind of going beyond just a lot of numbers and highlighting elements. So thank you for that. All right. I believe do we have any future agenda items? Oh, you do? Okay.
We will be having a December meeting, as mentioned previously. We will have our federal advocacy program and our state advocacy program, as well as both our federal and state lobbyists provide more detail on what's going on in our state government as well as our federal government.
Okay, well, great. Okay, then if that's the case, I think we're all done and it's not 3 o'clock, but it's much closer than it has been. So I will adjourn this meeting at 3:08.